The Isle of Skye on the west coast of Scotland is the northernmost and largest of the Inner Hebrides. At the end of August this year, I was lucky enough to be able to join the Plockton and Thornaby Kayaking Club, assisting Kirsty in leading a trip on the Isle of Skye for a full week. Skye is an incredibly popular tourist destination. It's become, very, very popular, especially due to, Instagram. People going there to all of the landmarks, all of the key geographical sites, which are absolutely stunning. Fantastic mountain ranges, beautiful scenery, fantastic coastline. So it's become incredibly popular with tourists, and it's in fact the second most visited place in Scotland outside of Edinburgh. We had a really decent group of kayakers on this trip. Some weren't able to attend for the full thing, and some only did part of the week. We were joined later in the week by others though, so there was always quite a good number of 5 or 6 paddlers on the water. Day one was a fantastic paddle. We were kind of forced into where we were going to paddle due to the wind conditions that day. The wind was quite strong, blowing from the southwest predominantly. So it meant that we had to kind of seek shelter on the eastern side of the island. So we picked a paddle out of Staffin at the northeastern side of the island, and we were hoping that we could shelter from most of the wind all day, paddling down towards Kilt Rock. Kilt Rock is an absolutely staggering formation of basalt sea columns that have been sea weathered over millennia. It's a jaw-dropping sight, it really is, and to add to it there is also a fantastic waterfall which you get a glorious view of if you paddle down this stretch of coastline. The wind really was quite strong. It was quite a challenging paddle heading south, and it was made all the worse at times when we were caught in downdrafts off the top of the cliffs. So everybody had to dig deep and paddle really hard at times. But everyone managed it okay. Every time that we stopped and weren't paddling, we were being blown steadily backwards, so we didn't want to hang around too long at the waterfall, and we knew that on the way back we would get it again, and this time with the wind on our back, so we'd be able to enjoy it a little bit more. We paddled on and stopped for lunch at a little bay, and then we got to actually see some dinosaur footprints in this little bay. On the paddle back north, just as we were approaching the waterfall again, Kirsty spotted a basking shark that seemed to be feeding. It was quite a way off, but we all got a good view of it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Photo or shark? Did you see it?
Yeah. definitely.
Sorry. Over it. Oh my god. Straight away I knew what it was. Shall we just... Right,
Oh, there now.
there it is, there.
So that's the bin, just there must be feeding there.
So that was amazing. It was the first sighting of a basking shark for many people in the group, including myself. Day one, really successful paddle, well enjoyed by everybody. Some fantastic scenery, not too bad with the weather, a little bit of wind to deal with on the way down there, but all in all, really good day. Day two, things changed a bit with the weather. The wind was not our friend and we had to kind of go back to the mainland to seek shelter. So we headed back over the Kyle of Loch Lash over the Skye Bridge and we paddled out of Plockton. Plockton is a stunningly beautiful little town, really famous. It's been used in lots of TV series and films, most famously by Hamish Macbeth, which was filmed there. Historically, it was a fishing and crofting community. Today, you're more likely to bump into artists and tour guides there. As I said, we were paddling here because we were trying to hide from the wind. The forecast for the day was for some really strong wind to come in the afternoon, blowing force 7, gusting force 8, I believe, later in the day. So we were on early and we basically hugged the shoreline, trying to keep amongst the rocks in the shelter of the wind all day. Plockton sits at the mouth of Loch Carron, which is a stunning location, a beautiful backdrop for this pretty little town. And the paddle was gorgeous. The water was absolutely crystal clear, just beautifully turquoise seas. Really, really good to paddle in, really nice to see. We paddled almost as far as the Skye Bridge and then we headed back the way that we'd come, just as the wind was starting to pick up. Now we managed to keep out of the wind most of the day. There was a bit of a strange encounter on the way back. We could see a group of sea kayakers off a little bit further out, more exposed than we were. Most of us stayed in shore to keep out of the wind, but David of the group went out to say hello. It's something that us sea kayakers do a lot. Always friendly, always chatting, finding out where people are going, where they've been, seeing what they're up to. But as he approached this group, it became quite clear that they were fairly new. In fact, some of them, it was their first time on a sea kayak. They had one leader with them, and they were in some pretty fierce wind. Certainly I wouldn't have enjoyed being in that sort of wind when I was brand new to sea kayaking. And as David approached, one of them actually capsized. And David, offered to assist, but the group leader wasn't having any of it. She was quite hostile towards him, I believe. So he just left them to it. On our paddle back in, the wind was really fierce. We had to paddle straight into it, not for long, for maybe half a kilometre. But at that point, we realised that we'd made a really good decision to be out of the wind that day. And that day, it really did come in strong in the afternoon. When we got back to the campsite, tents were blowing away. Not ours, but other people in the campsite, tents were blowing away, and others were having a really hard time pitching theirs. So we had done well to stay out of the wind. It was pretty hard to imagine that a group of new sea kayakers would have been able to paddle back into that wind. And sure enough, only the guide landed later on where we were busy packing away. And she proceeded to have a real go at David for approaching and apparently causing members of her group to capsize. And I mean, she was really quite rude to him. Everyone was a bit baffled by it because all he had done was approach to say hello, just being friendly, And if people are out in conditions where simply being approached by somebody causes them to capsize, well then surely the only conclusion to draw is that they're out in conditions that are too strong for them, which comes down to the leader at the end of the day. The following day, the winds were just way too strong for us to paddle anywhere. We did, every night we had a good look at the map, we looked at the plan, looked at the forecast, looked at what we could do, but everyone was in agreement that the forecast was just way too strong for the next day. So we actually had a day off the water. Some people went up some of the mountains. I spent a day driving around trying to get a little bit of footage. And, what a place for it. Skye is absolutely staggering. You can see why it is so popular with tourists. It's a truly breathtaking place. After our day off the water, we were really keen to do a good paddle and make it a big one as well. We'd looked at the map and the winds were a lot kinder, so we decided to head to the north of the island and paddle out of Dunvegan Lock. The plan was to go up the western side of the loch, staying out of the wind as much as possible, which was still blowing in from the west. And then when we got to Dunvegan Head, which are the largest sea cliffs on the entire island, we thought, well, we'd just pop our head around the corner and see what it's like. And if it's fine, we'll carry on and do Dunvegan Head. If it was looking a bit messy, a bit choppy, a bit too windy, then we could always turn back around and head back in towards the loch. As we were loading the boats to get on the water, there were some really distant splashes, some gannets were feeding, but Kirsty was adamant that she had seen some dolphins amongst these splashes. It was at quite a distance though, so Kirsty got the binoculars out and sure enough, amongst it there was a large group of common dolphins feeding. So we were quite excited as we got on the water that we might encounter them later in the day. As it happened, this turned out to be one of the most, wildlife-filled days I've ever had in a sea kayak. It was absolutely incredible. As we got on the water, these dolphins were still around on the other side of the loch, but we just paddled on up, carried on with our plan, and sure enough, this group of dolphins sort of zigzagged the loch all day. And then there were other groups of dolphins further out to the north, and these groups just crisscrossed the loch all day long, giving us a fantastic sight. We had harbour porpoises, you could hear them snorting all around us. It was amazing. Always keen to get an encounter with the dolphins. I paddled a little bit further out from the shore than the rest of the group, so I was maybe a kilometre offshore, and the other guys were shielding out of the wind closer into the shoreline. There was a group of dolphins behind us, and I thought if I was this far out, I might get a good chance of them passing me. As it happens, something much bigger actually appeared out in front of me. Now I was confused as to what it was because I hadn't seen anything that big in the water before in the UK, and I kind of saw it head on, but I could hear the group who were to my left, who must have got a much better profile shot of this animal, screaming with delight that they'd seen something. Now, I just carried on paddling, didn't really know what it was, I just knew it was big. So I paddled on, and then whatever it was popped up behind me, and I heard, a big sort of blow from this animal, and then it went back under the water again. When I rejoined the group, they had seen a good profile shot of it and confirmed that it was a minke whale. So that was our first minke whale sighting of the day, but it would not be our last. We stopped for lunch just shy of Dunvegan Head, just to give us a little bit of a break and a nice bit of lunch before we paddled on to investigate what Dunvegan Head was looking like. As it happens, when we got around the corner at Dunvegan Head, things were really calm, really quiet. So we paddled on right round the corner, passing these sea cliffs which tower 300 metres above you. It's a staggering sight, really, really fantastic to see. We even got a few sea eagles circling above us, above the cliffs, which was absolutely incredible. So it was just absolutely fantastic. And, to our right-hand side, we had some fantastic views of the Outer Hebrides. It was good fun trying to name all of the islands and look at the map and try and work out what each of them were.
Got 9 trainers on.
then turned around, couldn't go too much further, so we turned around and we crossed the mouth of the loch. There was a beautiful coral beach on the other side of the loch that we wanted to go and investigate and wanted to go and see. So we were crossing the loch, and again, you know, got buzzed by a few groups of dolphins.
Yeah. Nah. Because I saw a massive breach from way over there. And then we've basically come up with them.
Eventually we got over to the coral beach, which was beautiful, you know, quite a popular tourist spot though, quite a lot of people on the beach. And then we started to head back to where we had put in, further towards the head of Dunvegan Loch. As we were paddling back across the loch to where we'd put in, there were these feeding frenzies going on all around us. You know, we could spot them ahead of us and off to the right-hand side of us. Gannets diving from above, dolphins coming up from underneath, and a minke whale passed in front of us again. I had shot off from the group a little bit to try and get across to the other side and see these bait balls a little bit closer up. And I was lucky enough to get a minke whale come up to the surface on a couple of occasions, quite close. Not entirely sure how close, but within 100 meters, I would say. And this thing was massive, really, really big. Problem with a GoPro, of course, is that they're a wide-angle lens. You've kind of got to be right next to anything to be able to see it, but you can kind of just still make it out in the distance there on the shot.
What a place, what a place.
Now, we don't know if this was the same minke whale that we'd seen earlier in the day, or if there were more than one in the loch itself, but it was amazing. It's my first time seeing a minke whale, and to see it in such an environment with so many other cetaceans around as well is just stunning. Really, really good. We were all really lucky that day. An absolutely fantastic paddle it was. While we had been planning all week, the best day for weather seemed to be the Saturday, and I had kind of had my hopes on this day as being the day that we could head around and paddle to Neist Point, which is sort of the westernmost point of the Isle of Skye. It's home to a world famous lighthouse, probably one of the most photographed lighthouses there is. It's absolutely stunning. So I had my fingers crossed every day that the weather was going to hold and that this day we could get around Neist Point. It was a smaller group on the water, just the 4 of us that day. When we got to Meanish Pier, which was our launching point for the day, there was a flag fluttering, which was at complete odds with the forecast. The forecast was for incredibly light winds, very, very calm day, but this flag was really going for it. So we looked at each other, we were still okay getting on the water, we were confident that we could cope and that things would be all right. We had to keep in the back of our minds that this might not be as calm as we thought it was going to be. With all of these paddles, the planning is a little bit difficult just because everything's a bit of an unknown. You've got your guidebooks, you've got your charts, you've got your maps, but local knowledge goes a long way in the world of sea kayaking. And with us only paddling here for the very first time, we were cautious. So as we headed round the corner towards Neist Point, it wasn't a very long paddle, we were only anticipating it being about an hour. In the end, it turned out being more like an hour and a half just because that wind was stronger than we thought. But we made it all the way around to Neist Point and, amazing, it was just a great sight. Somewhere that I've seen in loads of photographs before. So it was really good to be able to paddle around this, really isolated spot. It's actually the westernmost point in the UK that you can drive to. So I suppose that's something, you know. The conditions here can be very, very choppy and very confused. There's a lot going on with the water, so we had to be cautious, and we hugged the shore quite a bit. It wasn't too bad as we rounded the point, but we knew that as the tide turned that, you know, things could get quite messy quite quickly. As we headed back out and around Nice Point on the way back, we had the wind behind us now, so that was pushing us along. It was really nice. It was a nice little bit of swell pushing us along as well. It didn't take us long to paddle back at all, but even the paddle back along here, you know, the scenery is just amazing. The landscape is fantastic. I was really pleased that we had managed to do it. I didn't want to, you know, say too much about it, but this trip, Nice Point, was a big thing for me. I really wanted to do that paddle and get around that point. So being able to do it, and on the last day that I was able to paddle as well, was really good. Really meant something, so that was decent. So we hadn't done too bad, you know. We got 4 good days on the water. Unfortunately, I couldn't paddle the next day because I had to head home, but the rest of the group headed out again, and by all accounts had another fantastic day on the water. But all this did was whet my appetite for more, really. Some fantastic scenery around Skye and some fantastic bits of coastline, especially that west coast. I definitely can see myself heading back up there to paddle a bit more of it. All in all though, an absolutely fantastic week. Great paddling, great company, really, really good group of people on the water, and nice to be able to spend a little bit of time with them off the water for a change as well. You know, a few stories exchanged around the campsite, you know, with a few drinks. Trying to escape the midges as well, you know, it was always fun. But yeah, really good trip, thoroughly enjoyed it.